Good evening, good evening. Welcome everyone. I know we are running a little behind, but we are here. And so, welcome to A Beautiful Life. And so, we're going to do a little different with the format. Thank you all for joining us. So, I am joined with none other than our special guest for this evening, David Torrance. And we are going to get started. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me here.
All right, we're going to jump right into the intro and we'll come right back with our beautiful viewing audience.
I'm living a beautiful life. I'm making a beautiful life. I'm changing, rearranging. I see a beautiful day. It's coming my way. It's a beautiful day.
Amen. It indeed is a beautiful day. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And so, as we be prepare for this upcoming week, I'm excited to have this guest on, David Torrance. How you doing tonight, David?
I'm doing a little bit better that I'm home. My baby boy is good. He's relaxing in his room right now. Hopefully he'll get some rest to be up for school tomorrow.
Yes. So we definitely have him in prayer for a definitely a speedy recovery. And so, as you all are coming into tonight's show, make sure that you share this broadcast. Sharing is caring. We want to make sure that all of our parents, caregivers, community at large is listening in and viewing this show. I know it's going to bless you because what this young man is doing in our community really is a yeoman's job. And oftentimes they're unsung heroes. You don't always hear what it is that they're doing. And at that appointed time is when they will surface. And so, David, I want to jump right into it because one thing I loved about um, attending your event recently, talk a little bit about the Talented 10th and why you started actually that initiative here in South Florida.
Yeah, of course. So Talented 10th is a 3 to 4 year mentoring program that was started and co-founded by myself and Miss Sharon Hughes, who works at the LA Lee YMCA. And if I'm being quite honest, it was her initiative that she really just nagged me on because she heard of me, heard of my skill set and what I've been doing in the community, and wanted me to touch a different demo. I think at the time I was doing a lot of like private clientele, working with people higher echelon and just consulting them. And she really was on me about really getting more grassroots with what I was doing. So the Townsend program was set up for 10 youth to learn investing via financial sustainability as well as professional development. So I always tell people, if you think of a house, the foundation for the program is divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is using creativity to solve real world problems. And then the pillars that will hold up the house is financial sustainability and professional development. And then the goal, right, which is that you think of that pyramid at the top of the house is freedom. And I'm often telling people that's what we're trying to do. We're using the foundation of divergent thinking and our pillars of financial sustainability and personal development to get closer to freedom. But most importantly, if you think about that house, who do you want to be there with you? Which is to say, freedom isn't just what we want for ourselves, but what we want hopefully for our family and our community and those around us. So talented
Right.
intent is really the essence of holistically thinking about wealth, economic mobility, but not just for oneself, but for those around us as well.
And what I love about, and shout out to Sharon. Sharon has this passion that will not stop. She's so hilarious, and I love her tenacity. I love her desire to get our young people to the table and in the room. And so, as you talk about going from corporate to really impacting the youth, how old are they who actually participate in the program?
Yeah, so our current cohort, we started for at 10th grade. So 10th grade to 12th. 10th grade is usually where we like to start. I'm actually thinking about going a little bit younger. Right now we have 6 youth that are involved, so we're still filling out the full 10. But I'm actually thinking about going a little bit younger, only because information moves so fast. And because of the speed in which information moves, it behooves me, I think, to get them a little bit younger. So we may actually be accepting eighth grade, a couple of eighth graders into the program, which I'm looking forward to, because again, it gives me a lot more to work with, because not only that, within that 3 to 4 year time frame that we have them in the Talented 10th program, we're also
Mhm.
building a portfolio for them, an investment portfolio, and that portfolio is gifted to them at the end of the
Mhm.
program. And that's more beautiful, because a lot of programs or organizations usually give scholarships, right? Which is cool. But we're giving what I like to call an equity scholarship, because unlike other scholarships, this will grow with time. For example, if you give a child $1,000 today as a scholarship, well, guess what? That $1,000 can only buy you 1,000, or probably a little bit less, depending on how much inflation is hit. But guess what? A portfolio or an equity scholarship, that grows year over year, month over month, week over week, right? So
Come
that's the
on.
part. So that's really where we're talking about the economic mobility. We're giving that to them within the program, on top of the, the professional development and the knowledge they're going to be building.
Now, let me tell you all why I was excited to have David on, because he's coined King David, a thought leader. Your approach, David, I think is not only unique, but it really takes into account what we are currently in. Your
Mhm.
mindset. You talk a little bit about why you don't migrate to just generational wealth, but when you really delved into the financial stability and why you selected that as a part of your curriculum.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. The reason is, well, the thought process just comes from experience, right? Yeah, I think it shows how much I know, and how much of a forward thinker I am. And then also, like, just from a like jargon standpoint, I don't like the word generational wealth anymore, because it's become kind of trendy, right? It's kind of been diluted. And oftentimes, if I'm being real, our community can't really see generation to generation, right?
Mm,
So because unfortunately we're having to deal with the day-to-day struggles. So a lot of us can't think that far out. So I don't I feel personally, and that's not a term I personally like to use. I like economic mobility, because it's kind of something you can do now, right? It keeps you grounded in the moment, and how you want to be mobile, right? But I decided to have that part of the curriculum, because when I looked at the landscape of
mhm.
what many people say is financial literacy, right? All I saw was personal finance, and all I saw was a consistent teaching of bank accounts, credit cards, and those are the things I knew that our children need to be aware of. But I knew was not what's going to save them, and I knew it's not what's going to give them what they really needed. So for me, it was, well, how can I creatively find what our community needs, and how can I best serve them? And really, for me, it started with the psychological understanding of money, assets, and how they view themselves. Because what I've learned is, and I've seen this just through growing up, you give rappers and athletes all this money, and guess what? They're going to go back to their psychology and their relationship with money, and that's going to
Come,
determine how they spend it, right? We've
come.
probably seen this year over year, generation. We can name rappers and athletes who have blown their careers and blown millions of dollars. And the question
Yes.
becomes, why is that? Right? Is because they don't have a true relationship with money, or a true understanding of assets. And for me, it's like, well, hey, if I can give a child a millionaire mindset before they get $1 million, that's the key. Because it's the
Uh,
opposite. Many of us are grooming our children to be $1 million athletes, not building $1 million mindset into them, so that if they ever do get there, that they are less likely to prosper if they don't have a great relationship with money. It's possible, but the probabilities, right, aren't skewed in their favor, if that makes sense.
this is so good, David. I think you opened up like a Pandora box when you talked about why it is you don't use generational wealth and how it's become trendy. Just even the thought processing behind how when people are struggling day to day, they can't even think, they can't even project their thoughts to go there. And when you're talking about the economic mobility, like the fact that it is possible based on the learning, based on um, the stability that you begin to develop in your household, this
Mhm.
is when you can begin to break those generational challenges that people have had, because now you are instilling, your children get a chance to see you in the current work out these challenges. Talk to us a little bit about how you came into the financial industry. Who was a mentor for you in getting you to see financial um, education and financial literacy, things of those nature, seeing it differently?
Yeah, so there's two people that come to mind. The first is my father. My father has been my father is what they would say back in a hustler, right? But my dad's he has an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I kid you not. We've owned a barbershop. We've owned a mobile car washing business. My dad's owned multiple real estate properties. We own two businesses, two pack and ship businesses. I've seen my dad grow businesses from nothing, right? Buy real estate from nothing. And so that comes from my dad, like that hustling, that entrepreneurial spirit, right? That I get
Hmm.
that from my dad, how to turn nothing into something. The
Hmm.
formal understanding of like accounting, investing, the stock market, and just the language, the jargon, right? Inflation, quantitative easing, quantitative destruction, asset liabilities, deflation, stagflation, inflation, all that understanding of like the economics and all that came from my cousin who's a financial advisor. So
Okay.
again, growing up watching my dad hustle, as they would say, all my life, right? I've developed that entrepreneurial spirit. But in terms
Hmm.
of finance and really understanding that came from my cousin who's a financial advisor. And it took me about 3 years to really get a good grasp on it and to be able to be what I am today. I don't like to call myself a guru. I just consider myself an investor and a philanthropist. I just have a high IQ and knowledge for all this because I've truly studied it for the last, at the time, 3 years. And even to this day, still studying and still learning and improving.
I want to touch on something else that you said. I think that it's interesting when you look at the dynamics of, you made mention of the sports players, the entertainers, and their story. Talk a little bit about why it was important for you to really face those different scenarios head on, in reference to acknowledging it, bringing it to the forefront, and getting our young people to really think about becoming that mindset that knows how to appreciate money. I love your terminologies, even in the way in which you see it, of saying, what is your relationship with money? Because that has a lot to do with how we respond in life to it. Talk a little bit about the program and some of the topics you have to really go in to even begin the conversation about their relationship with money.
Yeah, so honestly, the way I got there, and then I'll go into the program and how that's integrated. The way I got there is because growing up, I thought basketball was going to be my saving grace, like
Mm,
most kids who come from underserved communities.
hmm.
One of my favorite rappers says um, you either rhyming on a mic or fiddling a basketball, right? Right. Those are the two ways, rapping and basketball, that kids try to get their way out of whatever situation they're in. So just like
Hmm.
growing up around that, having friends around that, right? That made me aware because I have that experience in life. Therefore, for me, it's like, well, I know there's other kids that are like that, right? So just being aware of that helped me and made me realize like it's that psychology that's important. Because if not, what happens is like your metric is off, and many children's their metric is off. They're looking to sports to save them and their family and get them to a bag, as they would say. But
Hmm.
the thing is, sports won't save them. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like the attributes you get from sports, working hard, teamwork, camaraderie, all those things are great. But the skill of like dribbling a basketball or throwing a football is very like minute in the grand scheme of life, right? So like the question becomes like, what should be your metric? The metric should be learning how to be the best version of yourself in everything that you do. That should be the measuring stick. that we do. So with that being said, like, how do we get to like this program that I have? Well, that thought process of becoming the best version of yourself, in the program is set this way. We want them to get 1% better in building their intellectual property. 1% better, right? And the way the program does that is one of our modules is called, the first module that we do is called value. And we call it that for two reasons. Number one, for them to understand value, right? And that's really important because price and value are not the same thing. And what do I mean by this? We'll go through a quick little example, right? This phone, right? I probably paid what, $1,000 for it. That was the price, but what's the value, right? Let's go to another example. Your health, your family, right? A car, right? You understand the difference between price and value. Relationships, right? The price relationships are very small, right? To start them, it doesn't take much other than a kind word and maybe a smile, but the value goes such a long way. And this is the thing: if children are not taught to understand value and opportunity cost, they will never have a true understanding of time. And why is time important? Because it's the one commodity, right, that is the most valuable. Time is our most valuable commodity. And once we have our children understand these concepts, that they're the biggest asset, that their mind is the best investment they can make and the best return they'll ever get, and that time is the most valuable commodity, now we're having a different conversation. Now they view their time differently. Now they want to do things that are more purposeful, that will add more value to them. Because guess what? Their scope on life is totally different. And those thought processes right there is what we need, because then once we do that, then we can start talking about investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, investing in businesses, because now we have a different understanding of what time is worth, what price is, what we are worth, and also like what matters up here. You know what I'm saying? Like, is that psychological approach that we really have to spend more time on. Once we do that, everything else becomes easier, because you know what happens? They're emotionally bought in. So many people are complaining about keeping children's attention. But once they're emotionally bought in, you don't gotta do nothing to keep their attention. They want to stay there, and they're yearning for the information, and they're hungry for it.
Let me tell you why I love this conversation. And I would love to, I want you to share this, because when we talked, you made mention of even how you break down them having an occupation and how much that is by the minute. And so the value at the time, give them a little brief synopsis of sharing that.
What I do is, in the program, we have something called a life balance sheet. It's very simple. And I ask the students, hey, give yourself a life GPA. And then I make a really corny joke and I say, your school GPA your life GPA can't be higher than your school GPA, right? So if a student has a 3.0, your life GPA can't be higher than that, right? Just to keep it realistic. So let's say a child gives themselves a 2.5. Well, from that, we have an Excel, there's this Excel spreadsheet that says that populates a number. And basically this number represents how much money they would make if they were a business, right? And if it's a 2.5 GPA, maybe like $50,000. So that means you're a business that makes $50,000. And then I asked them, hey, how much time do you spend streaming shows and movies and things of that sort? How much time do you spend leisurely on social media? And what happens is, per week, you put that number in, and now we have a value, right, that's taking away from you as a business. Because from that 2.5 GPA and that $50,000 business, we can extrapolate that their value per hour is probably like $15 or $20 an hour. So now, by social media and streaming, we can see how much value they're taking away from themselves. And then from there, I'll say, well, let's make it fair. What things are you doing to add to yourself, right? And then maybe someone will say, watching a podcast, and maybe someone will say, I do volunteering, right? So we'll put those two things. But what will happen is, we'll see, especially with this current generation, the streaming and being on the phone, that time outweighs anything they do on the other side. And what we identify that is assets and liabilities. Streaming, being on the phone, those are liabilities. They're not adding any value to you, right? And what happens is, they're able to take self-inventory and see, oh my goodness, if my time is worth $20 an hour and I'm spending all this time on my phone and streaming, Now my $50,000 business was a $25,000 business, right? You
Come
lost
on.
this value. And then if I even add, the assets, maybe I'm back up to 30. But I originally was a $50,000 business. So the question becomes, how can I take self-inventory and now realign my life so that I'm having more assets than liabilities in my life? And guess what happens in that scenario that I just gave you? Number
Mhm.
one, the child was able to take self-inventory of who they are. Number two, they're able to understand their time. Number
Right.
three, they're able to understand the opportunity cost. And number four, the coolest part, I taught them a balance sheet, because a balance sheet is what? Assets and liabilities.
Come on.
So I taught them an investing term and an
Mhm.
investing financial statement without having to talk about investing. All I did was talk about life. And that's how we
This
should be teaching our kids.
this is why I think the route in which you've taken to share this really should catch our attention, because when I think about it, you made mention of assets and liabilities, and I think about how the needle in our generation, particularly, and even in our culture, is constantly moving for an appreciation for things that depreciate. We constantly want to look
Yes.
the part, and it's not as much emphasis on being the part. It's not as much emphasis on making sure that we have a greater appreciation for assets. This is why I love, David, when you open and made mention of, we give equity scholarships, because in your program, talk a little bit about that. In your program, talk about how you get the scholars to go from that instant gratification
Mhm.
to now understanding and appreciating deferred gratification.
Yeah, and I have a term for what you're describing, what you're doing so well at doing. I call it a rich mindset versus a wealthy mindset, right?
Mm,
The appreciation for depreciation, that's a rich mindset, not a
mhm,
wealthy mindset, because wealth outlives you. Riches is just for the now, and it's just for glamour, it's just for show. It's cultural, right?
mhm.
So I thank you for highlighting that, because that's exactly what I try to explain to the kids. But the reason why, and I'm sorry, can you say your question one more time? Because I kind of lost my train of thought.
Sure. No, I want you to talk a little bit about the shift that you helped to make in their minds,
Yes,
of
yes,
having a desire to now go to have a greater appreciation for things that are deferred, understanding the
yeah,
understanding.
yeah. And honestly, I think it's two things. Number one, I'm really blessed with the group of kids that I have. They are actually very, they have a lot, they're very wise for their age.
Mm,
And also, number two, I think is because they know I didn't get there that fast.
mm,
So I think that plays a big part. For example, like what I've noticed is we go back to rappers and athletes, like there's a perception that it came overnight, right? That it's
right, right,
one viral video, one viral song, and now I'm
right.
this, right? But for me, they knew my story was a 3 year long road, essentially, right? That it wasn't overnight, that it took time, right? And not even that, it's still taking time, right? I have a
Mhm,
goal to be at seven figures before I'm 35, right? That's a goal I have for myself, right? So for them to like have their mentor say, "Hey, this didn't come overnight, and it's still not coming overnight," right? It now has them like, "Well, you know what? Then for me, it's not going to come overnight. It's going to be a long game." And not only that, I told them that the reason I'm still successful, because I know many people who have had the opportunity to step away from their jobs and do great things, but I know some people who've had to go back. What also has made me a successful leaving, my quote unquote former profession, is the fact that I've built businesses and a lifestyle that's sustainable. So not only that, in real time, they're seeing me still do it. So I think that's really important, to be a doer, right, of what you're telling them.
right.
And kids can weed out BS pretty quick. That's the beautiful part. So they know I'm genuine. They know that I'm very real in what I'm saying to them, and that they respect. And because of that, they trust what I say, and they're like, you know what? I want the long road too, because wealth is more sustainable over the long term than the short term too. So that's the kicker, right? And because they're educated now and they
Mhm,
see me do it, and not only that, I'm typically bringing in people to speak with them, and that they're seeing the same thing, that wow, this didn't come overnight, that this was a delayed, process. or
Right.
deferred instead of the instant gratification, they have a better understanding because they've seen it, they felt it, right, and it's constantly being fed to them, right. It's just a engine that's keep running. So I think that's honestly how I've been able to do it.
You know, this is such a good conversation, and I know some people who are on currently, who I know can have a really a great appreciation for this conversation. I want to, as we begin to wrap up, but I want to go into this topic. And so, when you're talking about the school to prison pipeline and it disproportionately affecting our youth, how do
Hmm.
you see your program eradicating some of these statistics?
Yeah. Well, I would say number one, the demographic that's I kind of want to say that I'm targeting that's like being attracted to the program. Number one, it gives them an opportunity to learn and again have a better relationship with money so that they're not willing to sell their soul for money, if that makes sense. Right. So that would keep them off the streets and in things that are unrelated to them being prosperous in life. That's number one. Number two, my program, I told you professional development is one of those pillars. I'm aligning myself with some joint ventures and strategic partnerships that will allow students who come through my program to have direct access to careers that they will not have to go to college for, that can get them into a salary based job, right? Coming out of high school, right? Getting internships. So when you talk about the school to prison pipeline, right, a lot of that has to do with our kids being undereducated, right? Has to be the underserved or misinformed. My program is going to inform them, is going to give them resources so they're not under resourced, right? And it's going to empower them in ways in which that isn't traditionally done. So I'm happy to honestly be a pillar in the South Florida community, not only again providing that financial sustainability and understanding of investing, but also that professional development, because I think it's the two things combined, as I said before, that gets them a little bit closer to freedom.
This is so good. And let me ask you, as we wrap up, I wanted to do this one comment because I know that you have the KP Cares Foundation.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing with that.
Yeah, so KP Cares Foundation is the nonprofit organization in which I run, right? And with that being said, the one of the programs that's underneath the KP Cares Foundation is the Talent to 10 program, which we talked about earlier in the sit down. So KP Cares Foundation is really geared towards creating educational resources and materials to teach the community about investing. So one of the first things that we created in 2020 was the stock market activity book. And this stock market activity book was actually inspired by my son, Aiden. The character is actually named after him because I wanted to actually be able to teach him investing. So KPK is one of the first things we actually really did was cool was come out with the stock market activity book to teach elementary youth kids investing at a foundational level. Because again, I told you information moves fast and I'm trying to get this information to them as early as possible. And many of the characters honestly don't look like our kids. When I came up with these characters, I wanted to make sure their nose were a little broad, those lips were a little full, right? So they can identify the hair is a little coarse, right? Because I want these characters to be identified with children when they see this book, right? That
So
was really important for me. Not only that, really have access to the investing knowledge that they need to learn because language is one of the hardest things when it comes to investing. And this book gives them a really good head start, right? Because we want to bridge that generational gap. So again, we have the stock market activity book we created. And then as we spoke about before, the Talented 10 program. And then also for youth who can't be a part of the Talented 10 program, because again, we only take 10 youth. We have an 8-week high school program that's we also include middle school for, right? That give them access to the information that our kids are learning in the Talented 10 program. Because again, I would hate to hoard all that great information and only give it to 10 kids that were with me for 3 to 4 years, right? I believe that's a little selfish. So instead, we've made it available to other kids so that they can get exposure to it as well. And essentially, I'm going to be building out a four-year university that's built out online for kids who can't be in part of Talented, who maybe live in a different state, to have access to all this information and really start building that economic mobility that we talked about earlier in the sit down.
this is fantastic. We actually have one of our beautiful viewing members. She's here from Georgia. And so she's asking how she could get the book. And so even with the program, um, shortly I'm going to put your information on, but what is the process for them with two of them, with the Town 10th and as far as the selection program.
Hmm.
And before you answer that, David, I even like that. I like the fact that they have to be interviewed. I had a chance to see
Yes.
your ceremony for those who are graduating from the program. And when I tell you, I was so impressed with how these high schoolers presented them their businesses that
Correct.
they were able to formulate while in this program, like the due diligence that they did, even in understanding the industry that they were going in, the
Yeah.
numbers that they shared.
Hmm.
uh, as we wrap up, and we truly are going to wrap up, but share with our beautiful viewing audience how their children can be a part of that, and then also what your global initiatives for those who are not local, how they can participate.
Yes, great question. So for the Talented 10th program, for students or parents who are interested in having their child be a part of that, during the summer, Miss Sharon goes through a selection process for anyone. So if anyone wanted to initially inquire, you should just
Mhm.
email info@kpsystem.org. Again, that's info@kpsystem.org. You would just send an inquiry. Hey, I have a child who's interested in the Talented program. From there, that information will get to Miss Sharon, and they will go through a foundational interview process with her. Then once
Okay.
that is done, we set up to where next they were actually interview with the children that are a part of this program. Because guess what? They got to be the ones to teach them and also build a relationship and rapport with them. So I want to make sure that they're comfortable too, because I want them to have equity in this whole process as well. And then once if they're as lucky to get past Miss Sharon and the students, then they gotta get to
Okay.
me, right? And I'm a pretty tough cookie to break. And it's hard to impress me because I don't judge the children by what they have. I base them on who they are. So it's all about character to me. I don't care about how much you know. I could teach you what you don't know. It's all about
Right.
character, right? And also how much the parent is bought in. Because without the parent there to support them, I know the child has a higher probability of falling behind. But with the parent support, I know that that child has a probability to go to the sky, right? I know that for a fact. So that's the process for getting a child with Talented 10. And then for the global program, the best way is to stay in contact with us. Join our email list. So if you were to go to our website, kpcaresfoundation.org, right, there's one of the first thing that pops is joining our email list. We throw out the dates. We do a lot of social media marketing, let parents know when our next global program is going. So for example, we have one going on now that started in January, that'll be ending in March. Our next will be starting up in April, and after April in the summer. And we'll be sending out and promoting all those dates for anyone who may be local or non-local to participate. The cool thing is the one we have going on now, which has 190 students across the U.S.,
Mhm.
also in the Virgin Islands, and we have a couple in Canada and Germany. We have 190 students. So that was really awesome to know that just by putting out some social media posts and email lists, we're able to garner right that much attention and youth to our program. And my goal is to have all 190 finished. That's my goal. So that's how you can get and participate with KP Cares and all the cool things we have going on. But it's really changing, and we have some partnerships that are coming up the pipeline. We talk about putting equity and education back into the community. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
It indeed is. And I tell you, you all, your team, kudos to you all. We are so grateful for what you are not only now doing in the community, but globally, with giving our young people the audacity to look beyond their environments. And so, you all, thank you for joining us. This is actually an opportunity. This is his information in reference to connecting with David Torrance uh, via email, website,
Mhm.
social media. It is David M. Torrance, all platforms. And so, of course, this will be on a recording. You can go back and see it, but definitely, you all connect with David. You want to see what it is that we can do to continue with supporting initiatives like this. Like I'm so big on not focusing in on all the issues. We know it, we see it, we can watch the news and see all of the issues. But are we solution focused enough, and do we have enough hope to see it differently, knowing that these young people, they're like arrows. The word of God speaks about how the Father is to point them, and so we have to do our due diligence. I know, as we close out, God, you Sharon to bring it to your attention about just how vitally important this information was needed in our community. And I tell you, these young people clearly have risen to the occasion, and you all are doing a phenomenal job. So I want to thank you so very much. Any last words that you would like to say? Because I know that you also have some people in the organization who have single parents, people who the parent may not have had this training themselves. Any last words that you want to share with them?
Yeah, there's two phrases I always like to give out and tell people, and they're two phrases that have changed my life. The first is desire is possibility seeking expression. And I'll say that again, desire is possibility seeking expression. So everything you want seeking to express itself, everything you want seeking to grow. And then the second thing I often tell people is what you're willing to have is what you're willing to give up. So if you're not willing to give up anything, you will not be willing to have anything. So I say that because many of us want things, but we have to be able to give something up. Freedom isn't free, right? So the question is like, what is freedom worth to you, and what are you willing to give up for it? And that will allow you to get to where you want to be. So invest at the level in which you expect results, and you'll get a little bit closer to where you want to be.
Awesome. So again, you all have heard from David Torrence. As we close out this show, I will forever remember them sharing the testimony of a young man who graduated from the program that night, that he was actually out of the country when they started the program or the training, and he committed to calling in. I believe he was in Jamaica, to call in every week to make sure that he was in attendance. And I think that's really what we have to create, David, creating a culture where there are expectations, where there are standards. Yes. I think standards have been so lessened, so lowered, that any excuse has taken the forefront. But when you're talking about being your greatest, when you're talking about making an impact, it is going to be where sacrifices have to be made. So Correct. Thank you for that environment that you're creating with our young people. Thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you for having me. I thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. So you all, thank you for tuning in on tonight. I am your host, JQ Lee. And without further ado, good night.
I'm living a beautiful life. I'm making a beautiful life. I'm changing, rearranging. I see a beautiful day.